What's going on, people? It's your boy Navajo. So today we've actually got a big announcement in the UK. It's going to come through by an individual called Rishi Sunak. We are going to double check and see what the budget is going to be for example, for all those people who are still on furlough, mortgages, etc. Now he's gonna reveal that all live within the next few minutes, and I think it will be best for you to just come live with me and we can double check and see exactly what Rishi Sunak has got in store for us for the UK. You know, lots of people have been out of work for well over a year. Now we want to understand the scale of the issue and also what the future requirements are going to be like for a lot of these employers. So let's jump straight into it, and actually let's just see what Mr. Sunak has got ready for us. So let's have a look.
Increases in government borrowing we haven't seen in real terms, that's adjusted for inflation, since world wars. A massive increase in government borrowing. He's not going to take any steps to reduce it this year or next year. That's the annual amount that he borrows, the so-called deficit. But thereafter, there will be tax rises, which he will announce today. Last night on the news at 10, I talked about a rolling programme of increases in corporation tax. I also talked last night about how he would be freezing the amount that you get tax-free before you pay tax, and then the amount that you get at lower rates of tax before you pay higher rates of tax, what's known as tax thresholds. We'll get that. So for me, what will be really interesting is after the budget, whether we focus on the splurge, the sort of good news, or the retrenchment in the subsequent years. And it'd be very interesting to see what we all make of it. Is it going to be a split? Are we going to focus on the bit where he tries to make us richer, or the bit later where arguably he'll make us a bit poorer?
Robert, for now, thank you. Let's take you back to the Commons. We'll just keep an eye on what's happening there. We've come to the end of Prime Minister's questions, and we're just waiting for the Chancellor to stand up. There he goes, his second budget. No, he sat back down again. Look, just to warn you, this is very much the hybrid Commons model that we have been getting used to during the duration of the pandemic, where, as you can see, there are a number of MPs allowed to be in the chamber for this budget speech, the budget speech of 2021. But of course, as we've seen throughout the pandemic, it's very much a virtual situation as well. So we will see MPs, as we did see throughout Prime Minister's questions, putting questions via their remote. So it might feel a little different. Louise, if I can bring you in, you know, we're used to the kind of the instant reaction to what the Chancellor has to say when he announces different measures. We're not going to presumably see that in the same way in this context.
Look, it's a piece of political theatre. Yes, it's about the economy. Yes, it's about, you know, our fiscal policy, but it's also political theatre. And it's not, when and I'm sure Joel remembers these, some of the Chancellor's jokes that they've cracked, some of which are better than others, I think would be a fair thing to say. You know, it's just not going to work in the situation we're in.
We're now hearing from the Deputy Speaker, Dame Eleanor Lang, as is tradition in her role as Chair of Ways and Means. She chairs the budget debate. She's the first woman to do so. This is her second, as it is Rishi Sunak's. So she'll be introducing the Chancellor in just a few minutes.
Nor during the replies of either the Leader of the Opposition or the Leader of the Scottish National Party.
This is going to be very, very interesting.
British Sign Language interpretation will continue until the end of the speech of the Leader of the Scottish National Party. And it's available to watch, quick advert here, on parliamentlive.tv. Mr. Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Madam Deputy Speaker.
Okay, here we go, people.
In my first budget, I announced our initial response to coronavirus. What was originally thought to be a temporary disruption to our way of life has fundamentally altered it. People are still being told to stay in their homes. Businesses have been ordered to close.
Here we are.
Thousands of people are in hospital.
Interesting.
Much has changed, but one thing has stayed the same. I said I would do what whatever it takes. I have done, and I will do so. We have announced over £280 billion of support, protecting jobs, keeping businesses afloat, helping families get by.
Yes.
Despite this unprecedented response, the damage coronavirus has done to our economy has been acute. Since March, over 700,000 people have lost their jobs. Our economy has shrunk by 10%, the largest fall in over 300 years. Our borrowing is the highest it has been outside of wartime.
That's crazy.
It's going to take this
Absolutely
country
crazy.
and the whole world a long time to recover from this extraordinary economic situation.
Yes.
But we will recover.
We will, 100%.
This budget meets the moment with a three-part plan to protect the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. First, we will continue doing whatever it takes to support the British people and businesses through this moment of crisis. Second, once we are on the way to recovery, we will need to begin fixing the public finances. And I want to be honest today about our plans to do that.
Yes.
And third, in today's budget, we begin the work of building our future economy. Madam Deputy Speaker, today's forecasts show that our response to coronavirus is working. The Prime Minister last week set out our cautious but irreversible roadmap to ease restrictions whilst protecting the British people. The NHS, deserving of immense praise, has had extraordinary success in vaccinating more than 20 million people across the United Kingdom. And combined with our economic response, one of the most comprehensive and generous in the world, this means the Office for Budget Responsibility are now forecasting, in their words, a swifter and more sustained recovery than they expected in November. The OBR now expect the economy to return to its pre-COVID level by the middle of next year, 6 months earlier than previously thought. That means growth is faster, unemployment lower, wages higher, investment higher, household incomes higher. But while our prospects are now stronger, coronavirus has done and is still doing profound damage. And today's forecasts make clear repairing the long-term damage will take time. The OBRs still expect that in 5 years' time, because of coronavirus, our economy will be 3% smaller than it would have been. Before I share the detail of the OBR's forecast, let me thank Richard Hughes and his team for their work. The OBR forecast that our economy will grow this year by 4%, by 7.3% in 2022, then 1.7, 1.6, and 1.7% in the last 3 years of the forecast. And the OBR have said that our interventions to support jobs have worked. In July last year, they expected unemployment to peak at 11.9%. Today, because of our interventions, they forecast a much lower peak, 6.5%. That means 1.8 million fewer people are expected to be out of work than previously thought.
Damn.
But every job lost is a tragedy, which is why protecting, creating, and supporting jobs remains my highest priority. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me turn straight away to the first part of this budget's plan to protect the jobs and livelihoods of the British people through the remaining phase of this crisis. First, the furlough scheme will be extended until the end of September.
Wow.
For employees,
Wow.
there will be no change to the terms. they will continue to receive 80% of their salary for hours not worked until the scheme ends. As businesses reopen, we will ask them to contribute alongside the taxpayer to the cost of paying their employees. Nothing will change until July, when we will ask for a small contribution of just 10% and 20% in August and September. The government is proud of the furlough, one of the most generous schemes in the world, effectively protecting millions of people's jobs and incomes.
Mental.
Second, support for the self-employed will also continue until September, with a fourth grant covering the period February to April, and a fifth and final grant from May onwards. The fourth grant will provide 3 months of support at 80% of average trading profits. For the fifth grant, people will continue to receive grants worth 3 months of average profits, with the system open for claims from late July. But as the economy reopens over the summer, it is fair to target our support towards those most affected by the pandemic.
Yes, sir.
So people whose turnover has fallen by 30% or more will continue to receive the full 80% grant.
Wow.
People whose turnover has fallen by less than 30% will therefore have less need of taxpayer support and will receive a 30% grant.
Interesting.
And I can also announce a major improvement in access to the self-employed scheme. When the scheme was launched, the newly self-employed couldn't qualify because they hadn't all filed the 1920 tax return. But as the tax return deadline has now passed, I can announce today that provided they filed a tax return by midnight last night, over 600,000 more people, many of whom became self-employed last year, can now claim the fourth and fifth grants.
Wow, that's brilliant. It's brilliant. Absolutely
Over the
brilliant.
course of this crisis, we will have spent £33 billion
Jeez.
supporting the self-employed.
Wow.
One of the most generous programs for self-employed people anywhere in the world.
100%.
Third, we're also extending our support for the lowest paid and most vulnerable. To support low-income households, the universal credit uplift of £20 a week will continue for a further 6 months, well beyond the end of this national lockdown. We'll provide working tax credit claimants with equivalent support for the next 6 months.
Brilliant.
And because of the way that system works operationally, we will need to do so with a one-off payment of £500. And over the course of this year, as the economy begins to recover, we are shifting our resources and focus towards getting people into decent, well-paid jobs. We reaffirm our commitment to end low pay, increasing the national living wage to £8.91 from April, an annual pay rise of almost £350 for someone working full-time on the national living wage. And my right honourable friends, the Education Secretary and the Work and Pension Secretary are taking action to give people the skills they need to get jobs or get better jobs. The Restart programme, supporting over 1 million long-term unemployed people. The number of work coaches doubled. The Kickstart scheme, funding high-quality jobs for over 250,000 young people. The Prime Minister's Lifetime Skills Guarantee, giving every adult the opportunity for a fully funded Level 3 qualification. And we want businesses to hire new apprentices, so we're paying them more to do it. Today, I am doubling the incentive payments we give businesses to £3,000. That's for all new apprentice hires of any age.
Wow.
Alongside investing £126 million of new money to triple the number of traineeships, we're taking what works to get people into jobs and making it better. Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the hidden tragedies of lockdown has been the increase in domestic abuse. So I'm announcing today an extra £19 million on top of the £125 million we announced at the spending review for domestic violence programmes to reduce the risk of reoffending and to pilot a network of respite rooms to provide specialist support for vulnerable homeless women. To recognise the sacrifices made by so many women and men in the armed forces community, I'm providing an additional £10 million to support veterans with mental health needs. And on current plans, the funding to support survivors of the thalidomide scandal runs out in 2023. They deserve better than to have constant uncertainty about the future costs of their care. So not only will I extend this funding with an initial down payment of around £40 million, I am today announcing a lifetime commitment guaranteeing funding forever. And let me thank the Thalidomide Trust and the Honourable Member for North Dorset for their leadership on this important issue. As well as supporting people's jobs, incomes, the lowest paid and most vulnerable, this budget also protects businesses. We've been providing businesses with direct cash grants through the recent restrictions. These grants come to an end in March. I can announce today that we will provide a new restart grant in April to help businesses reopen and get going again. Non-essential retail businesses will open first, so they will receive grants of up to £6,000 per premises. Hospitality and leisure businesses, including personal care and gyms, will open later or be more impacted by restrictions when they do, so we'll give them grants of up to £18,000. That's £5 billion of new grants, on top of the £20 billion we've already provided, taking our direct total cash support to business to £25 billion. And I pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for Romsey and Southampton North, for highlighting the particular needs of the personal care sector. And with my right honourable friend, the Culture Secretary, we're making available £700 million to support our incredible arts, culture and sporting institutions as they reopen. Backing the UK and Ireland's joint 2030 World Cup bid, launching a new approach to apprenticeships in the creative industries, and extending our £500 million film and TV production restart scheme. Even with the new restart grants, some businesses will also need loans to see them through. As the Bounce Back Loan and CBILS programs come to an end, we're introducing a new recovery loan scheme to take their place. Businesses of any size can apply for loans from £25,000 up to £10 million through to the end of this year. And the government will provide a guarantee to lenders of 80%. Last year, we provided an unprecedented 100% business rates holiday in England for all eligible businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors. A tax cut worth £10 billion.
Nice.
This year, we'll continue with the 100% business rates holiday for the first 3 months of the year. In other words, through to the end of June. For the remaining 9 months of the year, business rates will still be discounted by 2/3, up to a value of £2 million for closed businesses, with a lower cap for those who have been able to stay open.
Amazing.
A £6 billion tax cut for business. One of the hardest hit sectors has been hospitality and tourism.
It has.
150,000 businesses that employ over 2.4 million people need our support. To protect those jobs, I can confirm that the 5% reduced rate of VAT will be extended for 6 months to the 30th of September.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
And even then, we won't go straight back to the 20% rate. We'll have an interim rate of 12.5% for another 6 months, not returning to the standard rate until April of next year. Yes. In total, we're cutting VAT next year by almost £5 billion.
Wow.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the housing sector supports over 500,000 jobs. The cut in stamp duty I announced last summer has helped hundreds of thousands of people buy a home and supported the economy at a critical time. But due to the sheer volume of transactions we're seeing, many new purchases won't complete in time for the end of March. So I can announce today the £500,000 nil rate band will not end on the 31st of March, it will end on the 30th of June. Then, to smooth the transition back to normal, the nil rate band will be £250,000, double its standard level, until the end of September, and we will only return to the usual level of £125,000 from October the 1st. Even with the stamp duty cut, there is still a significant barrier to people getting on the housing ladder, the cost of a deposit.
Yes.
So I'm announcing today a new policy to stand behind home buyers, a mortgage guarantee. Lenders who provide mortgages to home buyers who can only afford a 5% deposit will benefit from a government guarantee on those mortgages. And I'm pleased to say that several of the country's largest lenders, including Lloyds, NatWest, Santander, Barclays and HSBC, will be offering these 95% mortgages from next month. And I know more, including Virgin Money, will follow shortly after. A policy that gives people who can't afford a big deposit the chance to buy their own home. As the Prime Minister has said, we want to turn generation rent into generation buy.
Brilliant.
So,
Brilliant.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the furlough extended to September. Self-employed grants extended to September. Universal credit uplift extended to September. More money to tackle domestic violence, bigger incentives to hire apprentices, higher grants to struggling businesses, extra funds for culture, arts and sport, new loan schemes to finance businesses, kickstart, restart, a lifetime skills guarantee, business rates cut, VAT cut, stamp duty cut, and a new mortgage guarantee. The first part of a budget that protects the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you can see, we're going long, extending our support well beyond the end of the roadmap to accommodate even the most cautious view about the time it might take to exit the restrictions. Let me summarise for the House the scale of our total fiscal response to coronavirus. At this budget, we are announcing an additional £65 billion of measures over this year and next to support the economy in response to coronavirus. Taking into account the significant support announced at the spending review, this means our total COVID support package this year and next is £352 billion.
My goodness.
And once you include the measures announced at spring budget last year, including the step change in capital investment, total fiscal support from this government over this year and next amounts to £407 billion. Coronavirus has caused one of the largest, most comprehensive and sustained economic shocks this country has ever faced. And by any objective analysis, this government has delivered one of the largest, most comprehensive and sustained responses this country has ever seen. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we're using the full measure of our fiscal firepower to protect the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. But the damage done by coronavirus, combined with a level of support unimaginable only 12 months ago, has created huge challenges for our public finances. The OBR's fiscal forecasts show that this year we have borrowed a record amount, £355 billion. That's 17% of our national income, the highest level of borrowing since World War II. Next year, as we continue our unprecedented response to this crisis, borrowing is forecast to be £234 billion, 10.3% of GDP, an amount so large it has only one rival in recent history, this year. Without corrective action, borrowing would continue at very high levels, leaving underlying debt rising indefinitely.
Yes.
Instead, because of the steps I am taking today, borrowing falls to 4.5% of GDP in 22-23, 3.5% in 23-24, then 2.9 and 2.8% in the following 2 years. And while underlying debt rises from 88.8% of GDP this year to 93.8% next year, it then peaks at 97.1% in 23-24 before stabilizing and falling slightly to 97% and 96.8% in the final 2 years of the forecast. Let me explain why this matters. The amount we've borrowed is comparable only with the amount we borrowed during the 2 world wars. It's going to be the work of many governments over many decades to pay it back.
Definitely.
Just as it would be irresponsible to withdraw support too soon, it would also be irresponsible to allow our future borrowing and debt to rise unchecked. When crises come, we need to be able to act. And we need the fiscal freedom to act. A freedom that you only have if you start with public finances in a good and strong place. The only reason we have been able to respond as boldly as we have to COVID is because 10 years of conservative governments painstakingly rebuilt our fiscal resilience.
Absolutely true.
When the next crisis comes, we need to be able to act again.
Yes.
And while our borrowing costs are affordable right now, interest rates and inflation may not stay low forever. And just a 1 percentage point increase in both would now cost us over £25 billion. And as we have seen in the markets over the last few weeks, sovereign bond yields can rise sharply. This budget is not the time to set detailed fiscal rules with precise targets and dates to achieve them by. I don't believe that would be sensible. But I do want to be honest about what I mean by sustainable public finances and how I plan to achieve them. Our fiscal decisions are guided by 3 principles. First, while it is right to help people and businesses through an acute crisis like this one, in normal times, the state should not be borrowing to pay for everyday public spending.
Very true.
Second, over the medium term, we cannot allow our debt to keep rising. And given how high our debt now is, we need to pay close attention to its affordability. And third, it is sensible to take advantage of lower interest rates to invest in capital projects that can drive our future growth. So the question is, how we achieve that, how we balance the extraordinary support we are providing to the economy right now with the need to begin the work of fixing our public finances. I have and always will be honest with the country about the challenges we face. So I'm announcing today 2 measures to begin that work. Let me take each in turn.
Yeah, like drinking.
Madam Deputy Speaker,
Like drinking.
our response to coronavirus has been fair, with the poorest households benefiting the most from our interventions. And our approach to fixing the public finances will be fair too, asking more of those people and businesses who can afford to contribute and protecting those who cannot.
Wow.
So this government is not going to raise rates of income tax, national insurance, or VAT. Instead, our first step is to freeze personal tax thresholds. We've nearly doubled the income tax personal allowance over the last decade, making it the most generous of any G20 country. We will, of course, deliver our promise to increase it again next year to £12,570, but we will then keep it at this more generous level until April 2026. The higher rate threshold will similarly be increased next year to £50,000 270, and will then also remain at that level for the same period.
Lovely.
Nobody's take-home pay will be less than it is now as a result of this policy.
Lovely.
But I want to be clear with all members that this policy does remove the incremental benefit created had thresholds continued to increase with inflation. We are not hiding it. I am here explaining it to the House, and it is in the budget document in black and white. It is a tax policy that is progressive and fair. And I will also maintain at their current levels until April 2026 the inheritance tax thresholds, the pensions lifetime allowance, the annual exempt amount in capital gains tax, and for 2 years from April 2022, the VAT registration threshold, which at £85,000 will remain more than twice as generous as the EU and OECD averages. We'll also tackle fraud in our COVID schemes with £100 million to set up a new HMRC task force of around 1,000 investigators, as well as new measures and new investment in HMRC to clamp down on tax avoidance and evasion. The full details are set out in the Red Book. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government is providing businesses with over £100 billion of support to get through this pandemic. So it is fair and necessary to ask them to contribute to our recovery. So the second step I am taking today is that in 2023, the rate of corporation tax paid on company profits will increase to 25%. Even after this change, the United Kingdom will still have the lowest corporation tax rate in the G7, lower than the United States, Canada, Italy, Japan, Germany, and France. We're also introducing some crucial protections. First, this new higher rate won't take effect until April 2023, well after the point when the OBR expect the economy to have recovered. And even then, because corporation tax is only charged on company profits,